What is good, everybody, man? Welcome into the Bluebloods, man, official podcast of FCS Football Central, man, live on YouTube, live on social media as well, man. Appreciate y'all tuning in. Shout out to our guy G in the chat from SWAC and a Fool, man. Always support. Shout out to G. Man, Coach's Corner edition, as always, myself, my guy, Coach Fred, man. Coach, how we feeling today, man?
I'm feeling good, man. G's not loud and late. I don't know whether to be upset or what, G. I thought it was two things you would always be, man. Loud and late. But hey, I get it. Not a problem.
You're just gonna have to. He's only late to y'all's practices, and sometimes the spring game. Sometimes the spring game he'll be late. I don't blame him, man. The tailgate's too good. If I didn't have to be there in a media capacity, bro, I might not be there till after halftime too. I get it.
But immediately after that post game speech is finished, I finished my post game meal. I'm out that gate just like him. I'm from 10 to 10.
I bet I feel you on that one, man. We got another mailbag episode. We told you guys we're trying to bring y'all as much content throughout the offseason as we possibly can. Trying to have 2 to 3 mailbags a week. This is mailbag, I believe, number 5 is what I tweeted out. Coach, we're going to talk about the most improved team or teams in the SWAC entering next season. We're going to talk about dark horse candidates to potentially compete and win an FCS national title. And then we're going to have a conversation, obviously, it's kind of played out at this point, but people still want to have it, about the myth of this FCS to FBS transfer portal success. And Coach, I got some statistics. Shout out to my guy Sam Herder from Hero Sports for kind of getting this together. Timothy for putting together a big spreadsheet about how a lot of guys who have transferred up to the FBS level have either succeeded or not. And I really want to dive into that. And there's some questions, Coach, just about the future of that. Whether it's players returning to schools, what happens if players don't find a home, that we'll probably chop it up about at the end of the episode. But Coach, I want to ask you this. This has been a big debate across social media just quickly, and I don't want to spend too much time on this. That there was I think it was Austin Rivers on the McAfee show, was asked about basketball players, NBA players coming to the NFL and vice versa. And he said there's 30 NBA players right now, at least, that he could take and put directly in the NFL and they'd be able to play. Your thoughts on just that whole debate? Because I'm very interested, as all of us being former athletes and covering the sport, I find it very hard to believe you could take 30 guys from the NBA and make an NFL roster.
No, not this far in their career. I don't know if you've watched an NBA game lately. Uh, that toughness thing ain't there to me. Now, if you catch it early in the career, catch them in college, I could go with that. But as far as taking 30, I don't know about 30. Um, Anthony Edwards, because he's the hot topic right now. Where are you going to play Anthony? Uh, I Anthony seems to be a tough-minded guy, but is he going to play running back? Uh, Tight end,
Wide receiver, maybe.
maybe. I
DB, like a safety,
Safety. Austin Rivers. He's got
not
to be
playing.
he's got to be a skill guy, and if he's a skill guy, he's got to be one of those corners that strictly cover. I just can't see Austin smacking nobody. Not saying that he wouldn't, but at this point, I just don't see 30 guys, and I watch quite a bit of NBA, but I just don't see 30 guys.
No, I listen. Okay, so and I was listening to Nightcap with Shannon, Gilbert Arenas, Ocho, and I thought Shannon made a good point, and so did Gil, where they were saying if you would have taken these players from high school and developed them into football players, that's a
Yeah,
different
yeah,
conversation. Just
yeah,
like if you would have taken, a Micah Parsons and developed him into an NBA. There's guys that could have played both sports, like Julius Peppers. If he would have stuck with basketball, probably could have made the NBA.
yeah.
But I don't think there's NBA guys right now, even if you gave them a
No,
year, Coach, if they train for a year, I don't even think there's 5 NBA guys, if you gave them a year of football training, that would make a roster in the NFL.
no, because I think that Julius Pepper could do it. He did it at a high level. He did
Yeah.
both. But I would go out on a limb to say, uh, which would challenge what Austin is saying, that era of basketball was completely different than this era of basketball. If you remember now, this time of year in that era of basketball, uh, you go in that paint if you want to, you would get tackled. You know, now it's not that nobody's trying to go to the paint, nobody's trying to dribble drive. I watched the game yesterday and got so frustrated. There were so many guys that gave up easy twos to kick it out for threes, or not drive to take the easy two to get the difficult step back three attempt. That's not the same area Julius Peppers played in. Antonio Gates, those guys,
Yeah.
Tony Gonzalez, those guys, they did it both at the college level. I think it's something that's got to be caught early, and I think it's something that's got to be caught even earlier than high school, because I think the AAU basketball circuit has turned to uh, future wannabe NBA players. They play the same way now. Nobody's playing in the post, uh, which is a tough mindset. You got to have it. Not saying kids are tough, but they're not asked to do that, and that's not what they watch anymore. So that they mimic what they watch. I just don't see 30 again. I'm not Chad. I'm not Gilbert. I'm not Shay Shay. So my opinion doesn't count, but I don't see 30.
No, not 30. I think there might be a few, like you said, like, who's the kid from was it the kid from Gonzaga? Who was like
Hmm.
a is it Jalen Suggs that was like the 3 or 4-star quarterback? Like, he was a baller,
Yes.
and if he would have stuck with it, I don't think he's an NFL quarterback, but I do think he would have been a really, really good college player, but and also too, if you flipped it around, I don't think there's 30 NFL guys who are going and making an NBA roster right now. Like, I
Oh, you can
I
find
can't
30 that would tell you that, but
yeah, oh, there's 30 that will tell you, and there might be 30 that can be the 12th man and play, like, cleanup minutes, but there's not 30 guys who can go be a all-star in the NBA. Because, like, the thing that got me about the debate is I think people forgot there's a difference. There's a lot of NBA guys who could have been stars in college football, but you were talking about the elite of the elite
really.
athletes at the NFL, where there's superstar college players coach that aren't in the NFL right now. That's where I think the conversation's lost. And also, too, coach, we'll move on. Like Shannon said, the level of athlete that's in the NFL is different. Basketball is a skill, and there's some freaks in the NBA. But I don't think people like, who was it Coach JB that said go stand on the sidelines in the NFL game
Yeah.
is different. Like, football players are a different just person in general, like in terms of freak athletes. So I find it hard to believe there's 30 that could go either way, even though they will say they probably could, because you got to have the competitor in you if you're at the highest of either level.
And I'll leave my point here at the FCS National Championship game, standing down on that sideline. When North Dakota State offensive line came out for pregame, that was a different level of human being. I mean, 6'4" and up, 300 some pounds. Nobody's fat. Everybody is just, rocked up. Like just big people. And I just don't see. And another thing, to Austin's point that I would like to challenge him on is that there's positions in the NFL that you are touching somebody every freaking play. That's a different mindset in itself, man. Ain't no flopping, ain't no bailouts, none of that. You're touching somebody physically every freaking play. Let that sink in.
I mean, you say that because Coach, and you were. I know he meant to say South Dakota State for those listening, because I know that's a important distinction
What
to
did I
some
say?
people. North
I didn't say
Dakota
that.
State. Yeah, you said
Oh,
North Dakota
snap.
State, but
My
yeah,
bad.
South
Yeah,
Dakota
yeah, yeah,
State.
yeah.
I
I'm
will
sure they
say,
were just as big.
oh yeah, they were. I saw them the year before. Coach walked out in the field, and when he saw Garrett Greenfield come out on the field, who by the way wasn't drafted, Coach 6'6", 311, and had a 38.5-inch vertical.
Crazy.
What are what are we like that? That is criminal level athleticism,
Crazy.
and he is fighting to make a roster right now.
Crazy to
That's the
think.
level. But let's shift gears, man. Get into our topics. We'll start in the SWAC, coach. Now, I'll let you give your Alcorn spiel about how you guys should be doubted and y'all are going to be the most improved team in the SWAC. But
Mm-mm.
give me somebody else that you see as a coach that it's just like, man, they really improved their roster from 2023 to 2024?
It's not us. We're bottom of the barrel, man. We're hoping to win a game. So it's not us. But again, I think we kind of touched on them the other day as well, and it's strictly on paper, and we'll have to see how it translates once you get in between the lines. But Cookman did a good job. I think they did an excellent job in the recruiting aspect. And the other thing with Cookman is that people forget they were in a lot of games late, and probably should have pulled some of those games off. And the other key thing with Cookman, they played with 3, 4 different quarterbacks. I think at one point they played with a quarterback that was a receiver that they moved over to quarterback for the week or whatever because they were uh, decimated in that room with injury. And now that they've improved up front on paper, the quarterback play you would like to think is going to go up as well. And again, they did an excellent job on paper. So for me, the most improved team entering into the 24 season on paper has to be Cookman.
I'm with you. And when I got this, when this question was submitted, I kind of pushed it back, a few episodes because I thought it was such an obvious one. Because when I look, I don't think you can pick a contender as the most improved roster. Obviously, FAM isn't going to be most improved. They just won it. They lose a lot. Jackson was like one game away from winning the division. Alabama State was, and I do think you could make a weird argument for Alabama State just because of how they upgraded some of those offensive rooms, especially quarterback with how bad their quarterback play was last year. But I'm still not going to give it to them. I look at the other side. You guys were like not even a game away from going to the SWAC championship, maybe like a half away from going to the SWAC championship.
Three
PV,
points.
yeah, PV loses a lot on that side. We don't Southern and Grambling have a lot of question marks, so I'm not going to give it to them. UAPB did improve, but I still think they're missing some significant pieces to be able to compete. And obviously, I think Texas Southern lost a good bit as well. I don't really know if they took that step forward. But Bethune-Cookman, man, I look and coach, I know we say there's different types of transfers. There's transfers that have playing experience, and there's transfers that came in that only have practice film. But what I like what Bethune did is they got instant impact transfers, but then they also utilized the high school recruiting ranks, and they kind of have this perfect mix of young building blocks that aren't going to have to be superstars day one, but they're going to be able to get some playing time to develop. And they got guys from the transfer portal that have played and I think are ready to come in day one and start. Like I look at the running back out of UNLV, Courtney Reese. I want to say he has like 45 plus games of experience, coach, at
Mhm.
the FBS level, an all Mountain West selection one year. So he's got proven experience. They need running back. I think he's going to come in day one and be able to compete. I like the wide receiver from Arizona State, Sean Russ. When you can get a 6'4" wide receiver on the outside in the SWAC, the potential's through the roof because the DBs tend to be a little bit on the smaller side for a lot of teams. And also, too, you get Raymond Woody Jr., his son, who's played at Cal, a defensive back, has the size to be a contributor day one. And then you look at the high school building blocks. Coach, they signed a three-star kid I really like, Matthew McKenzie, 6'3", almost 200 pounds coming out of high school.
Yeah. Mom and dad happy he gone. You know what I mean? That's a lot of groceries being ate up by a high school kid. But
Uh,
again, you hit on a great point. They have a good mix. Some of those signees were able to get there in the spring, which I think is very important because you have to mix all that and you have to make sure that it comes out equal, that the chemistry is what it needs to be. So I think that's going to be their biggest challenge here, depending on when they got all those guys and when they get those guys again in the summer before camp. So I've heard stories that Cookman don't bring their kids back until camp, and if that's the case, that's going to be tough because you basically have 30 days, not counting Sundays, to get ready for that first week. So if they only bring their guys back for camp, which is at the end of July, uh, then they may get off to a slow start and it may be tough to make up ground. But if they bring those guys in, I think in enough time to jail, they give themselves a fighting chance.
yeah, I mean, and you also have quarterbacks that come with some experience. Cameron Ransom from McNeese, Luke Sprague is back, community college guy. Walter Simmons is back. You land the transfer out of Delaware State, who has playing experience for them. So I think what they did well is they got a bunch of guys in case they do have injuries that I don't know if it's going to be. You don't have to convert a wide receiver to quarterback for a game or so.
Yeah.
Um, I like that. And then also too, you kind of took my last point, and this is kind of important when I'm doing my research for top 25s, preseason predictions. I always look at teams that had close losses because those are usually the good historically. Let me just say that statistically, like historically speaking, those are the teams that either take a big step forward or the ones that just don't learn how to win, and they're right back in that same spot. And you got to make some changes on the coaching staff. Coach, they had 6 FCS losses last year. 4 of those were by 10 points or less.
Yep.
So, and then also too, Coach, you talk about home games. Now I know Bethune's not like this monstrous stadium that's impossible to go win at, but still it's tough to win on the road regardless of where you play. It's tough to get on that bus, take that trip, and go win that game and then get back on the bus and go home. Mercer, Alabama State, Jackson, Grambling, neutral site with FAMU. You got a lot of games in that state at home, and they're against key opponents. That could
Right.
be a huge step forward for them if they could knock off. We talked about you picked them to potentially upset Mercer as one of the bigger upsets of the year. That's going to be one of the bigger FCS out of conference wins for the SWAC if they pull that off. And then if you knock off Alabama State or Jackson, you're knocking off one of the favorites in that division. And then do they make a run to jump Alabama A&M in the rankings? And then if Bama State or Jackson or FAM isn't what you think they are, and you can knock off one of them, you could potentially be a top 3 team in that division.
Sneak right into the hunt toward the end of the season. It's a tough place to play. It's not probably as tough to play there as it is at our place, but you get there on Friday, unless you go stay in Orlando. Uh, there's really nowhere to stay in Daytona except for the beach line.
Yeah.
So you get there because you want to get there a decent hour on Friday. So now, as a coach, you're fighting the hey, stay your ass off the beach deal. Uh, you're fighting the DoorDash deal. Constantly people in the lobby, and kids are going to be kids. So I mean, you're in Daytona. They walk out their back window of the room, they can see the boardwalk. That becomes interesting. And then now you get to Saturday, you got to get back on the bus, and then you got to drive uh, to the city stadium, which is not close. Uh, and there's liable to be 50 people there. There may not be 50 people there. So it's going to be tough to get yourself going in that atmosphere after a bus trip, after a Friday night of being told and chasing kids not to be on the beach. It really, enforcing curfew and stuff like that, man. And then they have an excellent band that plays the whole game. That's the only place I've ever been, Blue, where the band played the whole game and the officials said nothing. I mean, they literally played the whole game when we went down to Daytona. But again, a win here, there, a lucky bounce here, there, they could be there at the end because, like I said, they look good on paper.
Yeah, I mean, and people also think you got to think about they competed with Jackson and Alabama State and some of these teams on the road last year.
They had Southern beat at home.
I mean, they had a few games, and I mean, really and truly, I think the FAM game got away from them. I don't think it was, like it was 24/7. I want to say, but it was still somewhat competitive at times. So I will give them the benefit of the doubt on that. But yeah, the Jackson game was just. I don't. I'll say this to be fair to Jackson, that was the worst game I've ever seen by the refs ever. I mean, I think Bethune got like 6 timeouts in that second half.
Yeah.
It was insane.
Yeah, yeah. I know they got at least four.
Yeah, it was just like if I was TC Taylor, I would have been unglued on the sidelines. Like you would have you would have had to throw me out. of the game. I mean, are you see? Because really and truly, that last time out, if they execute the Hail Mary,
They win the game.
dude, can you imagine if they would have won with a
Oh
fourth or
man.
fifth timeout? The SWAC office would have had to take away the win. Like, I mean, that's how
Oh,
atrocious it. I mean, that was just insane. But coach, moving on to the next topic, I think we both agree it's Bethune. I see questions about PV. I don't think PV improved. I mean, they just won the division.
they
They
play
got a
for the
new OC.
championship.
Yeah, they just got a new OC. I just don't see. I mean, what did they add to make them significantly improve? They still got questions on a lot of different positions. I don't personally think PV would be most improved in terms of the MEAC. Someone asked us about the MEAC. Just off the top of your head, coach, I would say, good lord. I mean,
Most improved. Um,
maybe Morgan.
um, I was gonna say either them and Norfolk made a lot of chatter, so to speak, but they lost so much.
Yeah,
Uh, in the transfer portal in their senior deal. Um, I would have to go Morgan over them, but it would be either them or Norfolk for
yeah.
me.
Norfolk brought in some good talent. It's just offensively they got so many question marks right now.
Yep, yep.
And then they lost a little bit in the transfer portal. So I'd be interested to see what Norfolk looks like. Um, Coach, dark horses for the FCS national title. This was a little tough. Okay, so
Mm.
I don't know who you picked. This is what I consider a dark horse, and it's very simple. Now I don't have all these rules like I would if we were talking like FBS because you got to make a whole lot of distinctions. Any team outside of the Dakotas, and not North Dakota, South Dakota. I'm talking about North Dakota State, South Dakota State, or Montana State would be dark horses in my opinion because those four are going to be a consensus top four team. Anyone outside of those four teams to win it would be a shock to the country, in my opinion.
Incarnate Word.
Ooh, I like it.
They
I didn't have them.
replaced. I know they lost a lot, but they replaced so much. And my rule of thumb: if you bring back a signal caller that has that type of experience, that gives you a leg up. And then you got to remember now, even though that guy was that guy, that program was maybe a snap away, two snaps away at most
From going.
from going uh, not long ago. So for me, they become the dark horse strictly because they can go win a 52-50 game, um, and they don't mind playing in that. That doesn't bother them. The only question that I would have with them if they got, first of all, if they get into the playoffs, and then what draw would they get? Would they eventually have to end up? And we saw the playoff games toward the end in the snow, or would they be able to, kind of hold close to home to get the weather in their favor? But for me, it's got to be them.
I will say, in terms of the playoffs, and I don't remember because I know it's still a lot of people are talking about the bidding and everything. This is the first year that they're going to rank the teams.
Yeah, no more money.
Well, there'll still be money involved somehow, if I'm not mistaken. It's just not going to go to the highest
Big
bidded
bank
team.
take, yeah, big
Yeah.
bank take
It,
big.
it
No,
so if you're a top seed, you get to host a game now.
yeah,
Eh, Coach, I had 3 teams. I had 2 that I really like, and then I have 1 honorable mention that I'm not 100% sold on, but I really like, and we've kind of already talked about it. The first one's Sac State.
mm,
I talked about it, probably a few episodes ago. I'm really, really high on
hmm
Sac State. 8-5 last year, second round. They bring back Caden Bennett at quarterback, and remember, we talked about why we're why did they bench Caden at the end of the season? Well, me and you got to go down to the All-Star game, got to talk to our guy
yeah,
Carlos. He
yeah,
told us that he had an injury that wasn't disclosed. So if
which
Caden's
makes
back
sense.
healthy, yeah, it makes way more sense because I think Caden Bennett has all-American potential with the way his legs, he can use his legs, use his arms. I also like the transfer class they brought in. Makai Coat from Utah, instant impact wide receiver. Mervin Kenyon from Idaho, coach at safety, 2-time all conference selection, All-American borderline defensive back. That's a big pickup at safety. Then you got Will Leota, Utah Tech, 3-time all-conference linebacker there. I think all three of those guys are day one starters. And then I look at Jay Rudolph at tight end. Shout out to my guy Timothy. He sent out an Excel sheet with all the transfer snaps. Listen, over
Timothy.
600 snaps last season. So an experienced tight end to come in after Marshall Martin left. And then on top of that, coach, over 900 snaps returning offensively.
Ooh,
That's a lot of experience.
that's a lot of game time, yo.
Experienced offensive line, All-American Jackson Slater's back. Wide receiving core, Devin Gandy, Jared Gibson are both back. You got Bennett at quarterback. I think Sac State in year 2 of Andy Thompson is going to be really, really good. And
That's good. That
if
is
they get the
good.
right draw, like you said, in the playoffs, that could be a very, very interesting one. And plus, on their schedule, they really only have 1 or 2 tough games. Now, I know the Big Sky's tough, but they should have the advantage in most of their games. And then the second one, coach, Villanova, 10-3, quarterfinal appearance last year. Coach, they had 2 losses at the FCS level last year. Albany in the regular season, who was the Final Four team, and South Dakota State in the playoffs. And if you remember, might
They
have
had a
been a
chance.
play or 2 away
Yeah,
from
had a
pulling off that
chance.
upset on the road, and they let it get away from them with those turnovers late in the first half. And I think it was the block punt they returned for a touchdown right before halftime. It got
Yep.
away from them. They went toe-to-toe, probably better than almost anybody last year with South Dakota State. They return a quarterback, Connor Watkins, who's a dual threat guy, elite wide receiving core coming back. Jalen Sanchez leads them, but they also added Devin Smith from North Carolina Central, who's a multi-year starter with a lot of experience. Plus, their defensive backfield, man, that secondary coach has a chance to be elite. Waxter's coming back, who was a second-team All-American for us, one of the highest-graded corners in the FCS. Devon Marshall also returns, who was one of the top corners in the country last year. I think Villanova has a really, really good mix. On top of all the question marks surrounding the CAA, they could be a really high seed. And if they get to host some of these teams, rather than like you said, going on the road, because we talked about Furman having a shot last year, they choked late, ended up having to go to Montana rather than potentially Montana having to come to South Carolina. And that was the difference. So I think Villanova's got a really, really good shot. And then also my honorable mention here is Central Arkansas. I mentioned them a few shows ago, how I was really high on them. They were 7-4 last year, coach, but they returned over 15 starters. And coach, their 2 conference losses. They lost by 14 to was it Oklahoma State, who went to the Big 12 championship, and then they lost on the road to North Dakota State, putting up 31 against the Bison. The 2 conference losses were by 4 combined points. They lost 2 games by 2 points in conference.
Back to your other pick. Didn't Villanova? What was their linebacker? Didn't they lose their top guy? Uh,
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I
and I
don't
guess
remember his name. He's
that's
he's
not
on the
as important.
UDFA.
Yeah, that's not as important as anyone. But I just know that he was one of their top guys defensively that they lost. So if, I'm with you on that pick. And then UCA. Um, but they just I wasn't thinking them, but I get what you're saying because I could say the same thing for Tarleton because I just think Tarleton is offensively, man. I just think they could go play with anybody.
I
Um,
like Tarleton. I'm not gonna
it
I'm not
just
gonna hate on that
matters.
pick.
It just matters where they play at, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. But I feel like they can play with anybody offensively.
The only reason I give it to UC over Tarleton right now is because of the question marks on Tarleton's defense. I don't think they
Yeah,
have an
yeah,
elite.
that's
I
fair.
don't think like quarterback wise, me and Timothy talked about this. Tarleton's returning quarterback was just a turnover machine last year, and it cost them in some big games. If he can bring the turnover count down, they could be scary. McElvain had a really good year, coach. 24 touchdowns, I think 5 picks with about 2,500 passing yards. They got that elite rushing attack. Derek Powell's the former All-American. Darius Hell is. They returned, I think, 4 starters on the offensive line. And then you got that bad man off the edge with David Walker, who was just a game wrecker, man. 40 tackles for loss, 20 and a half sacks over the past 2 seasons. I think they're a more complete team on paper right now. Now, I will say the reason they're an honorable mention coach and not an actual pick, I just keep thinking Brown, who's the head coach, Nathan Brown, has consistently underachieved way too much. And on paper, I do think they might have a top 6 roster in the country, but they've never had a top 6 result. And I was talking to my guy Jamie, man, from the Fan Nation guys, Jamie Williams, and he was telling me if you replace their head coach with the head coach at Southern Utah, he'd pick them to be a top 8 seed right now.
Mm.
But it's just Brown has never done it as a head coach, and that is concerning. And that's why I have him as an honorable mention. Coach, shifting topics here. Our final topic. This one will be interesting, and the chat definitely can get involved. I just labeled it the myth of FCS to FBS transfer success, Coach, because I know you deal with it firsthand, where players just straight up tell you, Coach, man, I can't make it from the FCS level. I got to go play FBS football. There's better opportunities, better money. All good. A shout out to Sam Herder. Timothy also compiled a list similar to this. Coach, last year there was roughly 314 FCS to FBS transfers going into 2023. Only 38% of the transfers started half the games that they played last year for their new school. Only 38%, man. And only 9% earned all conference honors at their new school.
I can dig it. I can dig it. The thing that we try and tell those guys, uh, understand the situation you're going into. Understand why they are knocking at your door. If you weren't all conference, if you wasn't first team all conference in the SWAC, what would make you think that? And I'm just pulling a random school. Memphis is knocking your door down for. And they have to understand when you're being recruited for depth purposes, what does that serve you? I think I've been on this soapbox one time before. Like, yeah, sure, you go out there and you get a couple more travel suits, and instead of getting 2 pair of sneakers, you get 4. You get a couple pair of shorts. But what is that? What is that doing for you when you're talking about wanting to have the opportunity? Because those guys aren't looking at what you did in one-on-ones. Sure, they may look at it, but they want to see what you're doing when the refs are out there and it's really counting. So this number is quite where right where we kind of thought it was, because you haven't heard of that breakout guy that would that you could point to and say, okay, this is why the floodgates have opened. We haven't had that yet, but just the allure of being able to go play at Memphis, being able to go to Wake Forest, leaving Alcorn, you know, they are attracted by that more than understanding, dude, you're the 5th defensive end in the room. Not to mention what they're recruiting out of high school. Where are you going to fit? And everybody has that kind of like that basketball talk we talked about earlier. Everybody has the mindset that I can do it. But dude, you're going in there behind 5 other guys that have been there for 3 years. What are you doing? So yeah, I'm gonna get off that soapbox.
Oh no, that this is the perfect topic to have the soapbox. I think that's what's why it was asked. Um, Coach, I mean, especially quarterbacks. I think that was kind of the topic that Sam was writing about, where in 2022, 10 quarterbacks went from FCS to FBS. The only one to start was
Starters.
was the only one to start at their new school was Cameron Ward at Washington State. And
Mhm.
then last year there was only 4, and one of them was Shador, which obviously was going to start wherever he went because his father was the head coach. But I mean, Coach, we were talking about 36% of all the transfers were all conference at the FCS level. Only 9% got it at their new school. And
Yeah.
it's one thing to like D-Lob said, it's one thing to bet on yourself, but I just don't understand the thinking of, if I'm not an elite player where I am, what makes me think I'm going to be an elite player at my new school? And at the end of the day, it's going to be hard to get drafted from FCS or Group of Five. Like, we've had that conversation on the show. We had it right after the draft. The thing that's confusing me is, do you think having film at, just give me like Tarleton State. 4 years of film at Tarleton State is better than 1 year of film at Tarleton State and a bunch of practice film at Memphis.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm all about the bet on yourself as well, but my thing is you want to make sure bets, right? I mean, you're not going to the Hard Rock and taking your money and just gonna go in there blind. Well, I shouldn't say that because some people do that. But if I've watched Blue play this slot machine for 30 minutes straight and hit nothing, and I know he's warmed that thing up with $300. Why would I follow him as soon as he get up out of that seat? Why would I go put my 300 in? I'm hoping that it's super warm now and any push is going to be that push, but that's just not a sure bet to me because I just sat there and watched you for 30 minutes play $300 and not get anything. You know what I mean? I'm all about self-confidence. I'm all about betting on myself as well, D, but some of these situations that they're betting on themselves just doesn't make sense. You got 4 months to go there and you leave, I'll use us because we're talking about it. You leave Alcorn in May, June, to show up at Memphis in July, maybe to learn a system. Um, I just you're not giving yourself a chance in that situation to me, especially if you're a 1 year guy. If you're a 1 year guy, that's asinine. If you're a 1 year guy. Now, if you got two, then that's something different. But a 1 year guy, really, and I hate saying 1 year, a 6 month guy, I mean, I just don't understand the thought process and what you're doing.
Yeah, man. I'm not sure, man. Shout out to my guy Cedric Walker in the chat, man. Appreciate you tuning in. I'll say this, Coach. I think the 1 year conversation is something that really, really needs to be had because if you kind of look at the data, and I need to break it down. I need to get with Timothy and us, like really do like an analysis on it. The guys who transfer with 2 or more years of eligibility left are usually fairly successful
Yeah, that's a
at the
different
FBS
conversation.
level.
Yeah.
But to me, I've never understood the 1 year bet on yourself because Coach, we talked about this with Rashida. We talked about this with JB. We talked about this with multiple guests on the show. Why are you transferring to a school that doesn't have any loyalty to you, that is already recruiting above your head on the recruiting trail? Why are you leaving with 1 year left, hoping that they're going to put all their faith in you? And they got guys who have been in the room that they already have more trust with, already have, you know, a better relationship with. Because, Coach, you're on the recruiting trail. Who do you have a better relationship with? Is it the kid that you've been recruiting for 3 months or the kid that you've been recruiting since he was a junior in high school?
Junior in high school, you know.
So,
But even that has changed though, B, not to cut you off, but even that has
yeah.
changed because the the high school mindset, and I'm not telling you where I'm recruiting at, I'm in Egypt. The high school mindset in Egypt has changed as well. Um, there's rules now in high schools, believe it or not, I can start my senior year or whatever year at McKinnell High School. Week 3, man, we ain't going nowhere. I can now leave and go play in same season for Fred High School
Yep.
and be good to go. So the mindset is starting to trickle down within to the high school system as well, which is really making it difficult because you know they don't say it, but in the back of their mind, everybody is still saying that I can go to Alcorn for 2 years, get myself good, and go to FSU. We're still fighting that fight with junior college, and we're recruiting 3 ways: high school, we're recruiting our kids, and we're recruiting junior college kids. And it's a shame that we have to recruit our kids to stay put, but that's just the way it is right now. In the 1 year bet on yourself deal, um, I just think it's got to be more education on that because if you've graduated from said university and that's what you want to do, hey man, have at it. But if you haven't graduated from said university and this is your senior year now, There's so many more things that go into play outside of football now. You got to think about what credits you're going to lose. You got to think about, okay, how does my degree plan fit into what they have? If it does fit, and those are all things that you've got to find out on the front end rather than once you get there and you're enrolled. I just think the the whole thought out process is not being thought out.
Well, also too, over the past 2 drafts, because this is really kind of, I still think for a long-term impact study, we need some more years in here because it's just kind of
Definitely, definitely.
recently happened. But over the past 2 years, Coach, let's look at the draft because ultimately that's the argument, right? Is that if I move up and got a better chance to get drafted, I potentially might get a short term check, maybe depending on NIL. But at the end of the day, it's not life changing money
No,
unless you're a Cameron Ward or a Jared Verse. And kids got to be honest with themselves. You're probably not a Jared Verse or Cam Ward type of player. Very rarely is a player of that caliber coming to the next level. And if you are that player, then this isn't for you. This message isn't for you. But in the draft this year, there was only one player who transferred up with a year left of eligibility and was drafted.
mm,
It was the offensive lineman from Yale who went to South Carolina, drafted in the 7th round. Last year, there was only one player selected who transferred up with 1 year left. It was a kid who went from Richmond to like Wake Forest to D-line. He was like a 5th round pick. So the stats are telling you that
stay
betting
put,
on yourself with 1 year doesn't pay off.
stay put.
And I think it was interesting, and I think we briefly touched on it on the Rashida episode, Coach, even though it wasn't a main topic. Mark Gronowski has come out in an interview and said, I've really considered leaving. And Coach, me and you were at the national championship the night after, and the general consensus was he was out the door that night.
I would have lost
And
everything.
yeah, and he's saying in interviews that scouts, GMs, and everything like that are telling him you have a better chance of being drafted at South Dakota State than you do if you leave for any other school. That should tell you everything you need to know right there.
That's being realistic with yourself. That's saying that, to me, that is truly betting on yourself. And, I'm going to do what I need to do. I'm going to put the numbers up. I'm going to put the work in. And he's going to get an opportunity. Um, and I feel like that for every FCS player, if you are that player. And I know the old cliche, if you can play, they'll find you. But then you also have to have the the ability to understand there's only so many jobs. I don't care if you're coming from Georgia. Not every player that was draft eligible from Georgia got an opportunity to go to the NFL. There's only so many spots. So you got to have that realistic uh, point stick out from somebody. If not in your mind, somebody around you've got to have that, hey man, we're gonna give ourselves a better opportunity staying here at Alcorn, becoming the offensive player of the year, uh, go do what we got to do, pro day, the whole nine, and then we'll go from there. I think that's got to be more the mindset for the 1 year guy, the 6 month guy, because at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you're established. So when those guys start coming around the campuses, they're not asking, "Hey, where's Blue?" Whenever Blue left to go to Utah.
Yeah.
What? He's a starter here. Why did he go to Utah? Well, Utah said he could have a truck, so he went to Utah. That kind of thing. So, the 1 year guy has to really look at the situation.
Yeah, and shout out to Coach Patterson, man, down at FAMU, man, tuned in. He said he needs some stats
What's up,
for
Coach?
this conversation. And Coach, I will say this, and this is something I would, maybe I'll get with Sam and Timothy, and we can try to find a way to, do a collab on this. I think those stats that I just read are even more skewed because, hear me out, it also doesn't include players who follow their coach to the FBS program.
Because that's a big thing
Because
as well. We just had a whole bunch of that happen.
because look at all those Incarnate Word kids who
Hmm.
went with oh man, who's my guy that just went up to Kenny? A bunch of those all conference guys are the reason Texas State just went to the first bowl game, I think, in school history. And a lot of those all conference guys started for him, but that's completely different as you're following a coach and a coaching staff that that's the staff that believed in you.
But think about it. They didn't take everybody.
Exactly. Exactly.
They didn't take everybody. And they knew everybody on that roster. So I'm sure some guys didn't get a phone call. I'm sure
Yeah.
some guys got a phone call. Whether it was from somebody on that staff or not, you know. So, you know, again, you have to be realistic with yourself and have an understanding of who you are as a player. Uh, and just understand your clock, man. If you didn't start until your senior year at said university, and then the other thing, I'm playing as many snaps as I want where I'm at. I'm playing until I get tired. Am I going to have a better opportunity to show what I can do in that situation or in a limited snap situation somewhere that I show up for 6 months?
Yeah, I just think, and I love what David Walker said, and I think his perspective, I wish more people would adopt. And I do want to preface this with, man, like, listen, if a kid hits the portal and goes and finds his place, that's cool. Like, I don't hate the portal, and I do think that we needed a transfer portal. It's just I think there's a lot of people making bad decisions with bad information and getting lied to on the recruiting trail. And I've talked to parents and players from FCS programs who have been lied to significantly, leaving and just being brought in for depth pieces, being promised things that weren't given. And you only got 1 year left. So what you gonna do, coach? You got 1 year left. Guess what? You signed the contract and now you're here and you're on the bench. I will say David Walker put it, I'm not hitting the portal because these are the guys that came and found me, that developed me, that I have played for, and I'm loyal to them just like they're loyal to me. Why would I go put my trust in another coaching staff for 1 year to put my best interest at heart?
That's a
And that
strong
is
deal.
that
That's
is the
strong.
perfect perspective of like the argument that I'm making on this show is with 1 year is way too risky. If you have 2 or 3 years and you were a freshman All-American, that's completely different.
Go do you. Ain't no doubt. Go do you.
Because look at the kid, oh my God, what is his name? Javion Cole. He was the kid that he started his career, I want to say, at Cal Poly, transferred up to San Jose State. Then he's going to, I think, Texas now. He was a freshman All-American, all-conference player at San Jose State, and now he's in the SEC.
I'm with it. I mean, dude, and again, I don't hate the portal. I just think the education about the portal wasn't there. And now people are just doing it blindly, not thinking about it. You know what I mean? Um, if you've done your research and you know where you're going and it's a legitimate opportunity, you're not walking into a receiver room that already has uh, 4 returning guys with playing time, 4 returning starters, and a room of 16 guys, then, I mean, you know, it is what it is. But to just jump just because that's what seems to be the thing to do, I think happens more time than not. Just because that's the hot thing to do. I'm looking around, I'm seeing guys that I played against for the last 3 years in this conference take off and go other places. I'm just as good as them. I can do the same thing. You know, not realizing what scenario or what the situation was for those guys that left and got those positions, you know, got themselves in position to sign at other places. Everybody's situation is different. And again, you've got to understand, man, you've got one football season left and it goes fast.
Yep.
And I think, you know, that's got to be the education piece that has to come about.
Yeah,
What the
man.
chat's saying, man? What the chat's saying about it?
Same thing. I think all the, some people are arguing, that you have to, you got to take the chance possibly. And that's fine. I'm not going to disagree with that. But and a lot of people agree it's just too risky. And there's so many examples. I mean, and I don't want to give people's names out right now. So many examples of guys who, if I named them, you'd be like, man, he was a baller at the FCS level. What happened to
But
him?
if you're not taking a chance to hear your name called, right? You're taking a chance. You are getting a player invite or undrafted opportunity, which you're going to get there
Mm.
as well. And the thing, and I'm speaking strictly for our conference, the thing that I think a lot of guys in our conference at this point are not really understanding is our conference is hot. And I know everybody's saying, oh, this is the fourth year, whatever, we hadn't got anybody drafted. But how many guys did we get that got that call at the end of the draft? And that's another one. So my guy, Timothy, when you get a chance, man, look up FCS conferences um, and how many guys got opportunities for player invite camp or undrafted camp signings compared to other conferences. I guarantee you we were ranked at the top half of that. So, you know, they're getting opportunities, maybe not to, and I think people need to understand also just the first day is when they walk across that stage. So as far as getting your name called, that's something different. But you're betting on getting the same thing. So if you're not leaving to get your name called, I mean, you're essentially you're really putting yourself in jeopardy of not even getting that call after the draft is completed. My opinion.
So I got to go through and update mine. I don't remember. I don't know what day. I think mine was updated on May 3rd. I think we got 64 UDFA contracts, and I think that's went up since the last. Because I haven't updated this since the 3rd, just because we've been going through website stuff. And then minicamp invites was at 104 on the 3rd. That's a lot of opportunities.
That's all you want. And
That's
then the other thing that I think the misconception is, as we have with Lady Liberty as well, a lot of these kids are getting CFL opportunities that they're turning down to go to an NFL or holding out, waiting on an NFL call. And I think a lot of people don't understand that CFL because the seasons are different. So the CFL comes in and they offer you a 2-year deal. Uh, Now you're really betting on yourself saying, no, thank you, Hamilton. Um, the Jaguars are going to call me. Hamilton's got to move on because it's a business. The Jags never call. Now you've missed your opportunity to play professional football because you were waiting on a undrafted free agent contract from the Jaguars. So those are also things that the public that we don't really get, but those are things that are happening as well behind the scenes.
yep. And we're gonna put a pin in it there, man. That was a good. Now let's take a full spin around, man, because we got to ask this question, but we already moved on. I didn't want to take too long for the show because we had some really good topics, and this goes back to our NFL NBA question earlier. Coach, what do you think's harder? And we'll end it here just quickly. What's harder to do? Be a corner on an island against an elite wide receiver, or be an ISO defender against an elite offensive player in basketball?
Oh man, I'm gonna lean with the corner, um, just because that's a lot of space um, to try to hold your own out there. Movements are similar, but I think the skill set is just a little bit different when you're talking about open running, using your hands, chasing things like that. So I would say corner on an island versus an elite receiver.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it's corner. Listen, as an O lineman, that's the spot I never want to be in. Um,
One on
ever.
one.
Yeah, never out in space. Listen, man, it's real nice to be on the line of scrimmage. When thinking about that, but yeah, I think it's corner, obviously, and I'm biased toward football. Now, I do think if it's an elite scorer and an elite wide receiver, I don't think either one of us have a chance to stop anybody. Like, if you got Kyrie Irving in front of you, bro, like what? Just foul them.
I'm a back up, and I'm just going to play the percentages on his jump shot rather than
Yep.
him going to the rim. So that's just
You
my
you you
mindset.
you ain't gonna catch me on the ground like yeah, it ain't happening, bro. I ain't getting crossed up by Kyrie Irving. We're just fouling, or he can hit the three. That's cool. We'll do that. But man, we appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll be back later this week. I think we're gonna be targeting Thursday for our second live stream of the week. Look out for the tweet. I'll put it out. Coach will put it out. asking for more questions, man. Listen, we're going to be coming live 2-3 times a week. We want to talk about the topics you guys want to talk about. So, man, make sure to submit your questions. If you got questions now, comment them in the chat, comment them under this video if you're watching the replay, or just DM us, man. You got our social medias right there as well, and the Blue Blood social media on the side of us. But, man, for myself, for Coach, hit the like button, subscribe. But for right now, man, we out.